In 1970, the United States military launched a rocket from New Mexico. It was a routine test. The rocket had a designated landing zone, a controlled site about 200 kilometers to the north, well within U.S. territory. It never arrived. Instead, the rocket veered off course without explanation, crossed an international border, and crashed into the dead center of a remote Mexican desert, a place locals had been warning about for decades, a place where radios go silent, where compasses spin, where animals refuse to go. The military retrieved the wreckage, filed their reports, and left without a word of public explanation. That desert has a name, and it's just one of 7 locations on this planet where the laws of physics appear to simply stop working. Not in legend, not in folklore, on instruments, on radar, on NASA satellites. The premise: we are taught that the universe operates on fixed laws. Gravity pulls everything downward at 9.8 meters per second squared. Water flows downhill. Radio waves travel at the speed of light. These are not suggestions. They are the architecture of reality itself. Except, there are 7 places on Earth where something interferes with that architecture. Documented, mapped, studied by physicists, military scientists, and international research teams, where the rules do not apply in the same way they do everywhere else. Some have partial explanations, some have none at all. We'll rank them from strange to genuinely unexplained, and we'll let you decide how far the official story actually goes. 5. The Oregon Vortex, number 5, Gold Hill, Oregon, USA. In a forest of sequoias, there is a circular zone 45 meters in diameter that has been open to visitors since 1930. In 95 years of continuous observation, no scientist has produced a complete explanation for what happens inside it. Brooms stand upright without support. Balls roll uphill on inclined surfaces. 2 people of identical height stand on a level board 1 meter apart, and one appears significantly taller. They switch places. Now the other one is taller. Compasses rotate. Pendulums deviate from vertical. Every measurement instrument brought into this zone behaves incorrectly. Skeptics correctly point out that a tilted structure sits within the zone, and that a warped visual environment causes proprioceptive errors. Your inner ear and your eyes send your brain conflicting information, producing an illusion of distorted gravity. That explains the visual effects. It does not explain why dogs, horses, and wild deer have refused to enter this specific 45-meter circle for 95 consecutive years. It does not explain why visitors report nausea, pressure, and dizziness before they ever enter the structure, standing on open ground outside with no tilted surfaces anywhere near them. And it does not explain the compasses. A compass does not have a vestibular system. It does not get confused by tilted walls. It responds only to magnetic fields. And inside the Oregon Vortex, something is interfering with that response. 90% of what happens here has an explanation. The remaining 10% has had 95 years to come up with one. It hasn't. 4. The Zone of Silence, Mexico, number 4. This is where we come back to that rocket. Durango, Mexico. The Mapimi Desert, an area of approximately 50 by 50 kilometers known locally as La Zona del Silencio, the Zone of Silence. Inside this zone, radio waves do not propagate normally. Radios go silent. Mobile signals vanish. Compasses spin without settling. Navigation instruments give false readings. The American Athena rocket that crashed here in 1970 was not malfunctioning when it launched. Its trajectory was correct. And then, somewhere over this desert, it turned without command and fell. When recovery teams arrived, they discovered the communication problems firsthand. They retrieved the rocket. They said nothing publicly. What they left behind is a location that continues to exhibit the same anomalies. Meteorites fall here at a statistically improbable rate. Dozens of cosmic fragments have been recovered within 30 kilometers. Local plants display unusual mutations, abnormal size, irregular forms. Albino turtles appear with a frequency far beyond statistical expectation. Birds reroute around the zone. Scientists point to high magnetite concentrations in the soil, proximity to a tectonic fault line, and localized effects on Earth's magnetic field. Each hypothesis explains one piece of the puzzle. None explains all of it simultaneously. There is one additional detail that receives little attention in the scientific literature. The zone of silence sits on the 30th parallel north, the same latitude as the Egyptian pyramids, the Bermuda Triangle, the Himalayas, the Mesopotamian river valleys where civilization began. Whether that means anything is a question this documentary will not answer for you, but it is a question worth sitting with. 3. The Boiling River, Peru. Number 3. The Peruvian Amazon, province of Puerto Inca, a river called Shanay-Timpishka, 9 kilometers long, 30 meters wide, average temperature in its hottest sections, 95 degrees Celsius. The highest recorded measurement, 99.1 degrees, 1 degree from boiling. Animals that fall into this river do not survive long enough to understand what has happened to them. The eyes cook first, proteins denaturing in seconds. The skin follows, then the muscle. What enters the river as a living creature leaves it as something unrecognizable. Local Ashaninka shamans have said for centuries that a great serpent spirit lives beneath this river, a being called Yakamama, Mother of Waters, and that her presence is what heats the current. Geophysicist Andres Russo spent years investigating the river scientifically. His conclusion: rainwater seeps through deep geological fault lines, descends several kilometers into the Earth's crust, is heated by geothermal gradient, and rises back to the surface already near boiling, a process called deep hydrothermal circulation. The mechanism is understood. What is not understood is why it produces 9 continuous kilometers of near boiling water, a scale that has no parallel anywhere else on the planet. Hot springs exist near volcanoes worldwide. Hydrothermal vents exist on the ocean floor, but a surface river flowing openly through a jungle, sustaining near boiling temperatures for 9 uninterrupted kilometers, with the nearest volcano 700 kilometers away. There is only one. Why here? Why this scale? Why this river and no other? Science has named the process. It has not answered those questions. 2. The Hessdalen Lights, Norway. Number 2. Hessdalen Valley, Central Norway. Population 150 people. Since the 1930s, luminous orbs have appeared in the sky above this valley. Not occasionally, consistently, for nearly a century. They range in color from white to yellow to deep red. They hover, sometimes for seconds, sometimes for over an hour, at altitudes between 20 meters and several hundred meters. Then they either drift slowly away or they accelerate to 30,000 kilometers per hour and disappear. Their surface temperature has been measured at approximately 5,000 degrees Celsius. That is the surface temperature of the sun. Their radiated power reaches 19 kilowatts. Since 1983, Project Hessdalen, a formal international scientific initiative involving Norwegian and Italian research institutions, has operated 4 automated monitoring stations in the valley, running 24 hours a day. Equipment includes multispectral cameras, radar, magnetometers, and VLF receivers. In one week-long field expedition in 1984, instruments recorded 53 confirmed sightings. In one documented encounter, researchers directed a laser beam at one of the lights. The object changed its blinking frequency in response. In 2024 and 2025, drone footage captured lights rising from the ground surface and from mountain ridges. Spectral analysis confirms oxygen and nitrogen emission lines consistent with plasma. Current hypotheses include piezoelectric effects from quartz-bearing rock, radon decay in the atmosphere, geomagnetic activity, and ionized dust. Each explains some of the data. None explains an object that responds to a laser. The Norwegian Research Council distributes the equivalent of over $1 billion annually in scientific funding, the amount allocated to study a documented, instrument-confirmed phenomenon that has appeared consistently for 90 years in this valley. Effectively zero. Draw your own conclusions. 1. The gravity anomaly, Hudson Bay, Canada. Number 1. Hudson Bay, Canada. This is not a visual anomaly. It is not an optical illusion. It cannot be explained by wind, terrain, or the architecture of the surrounding landscape. If you stand on the shores of Hudson Bay and step onto a scale, you will weigh less than you do anywhere else on Earth. Not by much, a fraction of a percent. But the measurement is real. It has been confirmed by NASA. In 2002, NASA and the German Aerospace Center launched the GRACE satellite mission, 2 spacecraft flying in tandem 220 kilometers apart, continuously mapping Earth's gravitational field with extreme precision. GRACE found it. A gravitational low over Hudson Bay, approximately 0.5% weaker than the planetary average. The leading explanation involves the Laurentide ice sheet, a glacier 3 kilometers thick that covered this entire region 10,000 years ago. Its weight was so immense that it pressed the Earth's crust downward into the mantle, like a thumb pressing into foam. When the ice melted, the crust began slowly rebounding, a process called post-glacial isostatic rebound. 10,000 years later, it still hasn't finished. The crust beneath Hudson Bay remains depressed, the mantle beneath it remains deformed, and the gravitational field above it remains measurably weaker than it should be. This explanation accounts for 25 to 45% of the anomaly. The remainder, confirmed by GRACE, is attributed to convection currents deep within the mantle, slow flows of molten rock that are actively pulling mass away from this region and redistributing it elsewhere. The Earth's interior is in motion, constantly, invisibly, and in one specific location, that motion has created a hole in gravity itself. Gravity, the force that holds moons in orbit, that keeps galaxies from flying apart, that is the most fundamental constant in the known universe, is measurably, objectively, instrumentally weaker above this Canadian bay, because a glacier stood here 10,000 years ago, and the planet has not yet recovered. A vortex that confuses instruments and repels animals, a desert that silences radios and redirects rockets, a jungle river that boils without a volcano, a valley where plasma spheres respond to lasers, and a bay where gravity itself is missing. Some of these have explanations. Some have partial ones. Some have been studied for 40 years and remain, in the most precise scientific sense of the word, unsolved. What they share is this: every single one of them was dismissed before it was studied, called folklore, called illusion, called the imagination of people who didn't know better, and then the instruments arrived, and the instruments agreed with the people. The universe is not a closed book. It is not a solved equation. There are still pages we haven't turned.